All right, well, hello everybody. Dave and I are trying something new. What do you call this? A video blog?
Video vlog?
A vlog. So we're vloggers.
Vloggers now.
This is the reason that I asked you for questions. We're gonna kind of, and we may bring some other people in at times. Just kind of, this is not a round table, but if it were a round table, we would be doing like a round table type discussion. But that's kind of what we want to do is talk through some questions. And so we've got some quirky ones already today. We've got some hard ones already today. We're going to do a few other just goofy things as well. We're kicking around the name for what this is. Our first, I think, maybe in the lead is I don't know, something like Off the Wall or Off the Wall Wednesdays. Or
Off the Wall Wednesdays.
And you want to explain why that Off the Wall?
Well, I think it's partially because some of the questions are kind of off the wall. For example, the first question that we received, and we got it from two people. Mm-hmm. Two people was
Bob Lowry
and
Rhonda Barnhouse.
And Rhonda Barnhouse both asked if Adam and Eve had belly buttons. So the question is kind of off the wall, and feeding off that, we decided, well, we'll just take the questions we're going to do, and we'll just pin them up here to the wall, and then we'll tear them down.
Unnecessarily.
Right. Totally unnecessarily.
Pin them up to the wall so that we can take them off the wall.
Right.
which is what we've done. So that was one of our names, Off the Wall Wednesday. I don't know, something like that. What else do we have? You had a good one. It was.
I really like alliterations, so I came up with. See if I can remember.
I know. I'm gonna have to look it up. I know whimsical was in
whimsical, there. Whimsical was in there. Wisdom, I think, was in there.
You know,
Wednesday words of wisdom and whimsy. I think that was it. I think that was it.
I like it better the second time. Wednesday words of wisdom and whimsy. So
when you actually say it out loud, it's
I just read it. I hadn't said it out loud. so we can put those two out. And people can
feel free to let us know in the comments. This will be, I guess we'll do YouTube, right?
Probably.
That'll probably be the easiest.
Probably, and we'll link it on Facebook, and you can comment and let us know what you want. So it doesn't really matter necessarily what you say. We'll probably do what we want anyway. But okay,
as per usual.
So I'm gonna set a timer. Actually, I didn't even tell Dave I was gonna do this. We're trying to keep this 30 minutes or less because I just know that sometimes when we get to talking. Who knows how long,
right?
But we know you'll lose attention before that. So I'm gonna set a timer. 30 minutes. Okay. So when that goes off, we'll just stop again.
Okay. Just wherever we're at, just done.
We'll just stop.
Maybe in the future we'll do like certain sections get certain minutes.
Yeah, maybe
We'll have to look at that, but yeah.
We don't have a sponsor currently, but we're looking for sponsors. This is a Dr. Pepper and cream soda. I had high hopes for it. You just can't beat the original, but they don't know it, but we'll say Dr. Pepper is a sponsor.
One of these days we'll get an official sponsor.
We hope so.
Start making in the dough.
We figure within, I said 6 months, Dave said 5 months, that this will be worldwide, like a phenomenon type of thing.
There'll be people, translating it for us, and it'll just be...
Yeah. If you can't tell, we're in the church library right now, and so I thought it might make us look smarter.
So for some of you, this is news. The church has a library.
That's right. I'm trying to look at some of the books we have back here. There's Mark's story and Luke's story.
That looks like a series.
Yeah, it is a series, I think. Oh yeah,
that's the oh, okay. Yeah.
And there's other classics. I'm just going to randomly pick one. Other classics such as The Shadow of His Wings that you could enjoy. So anyway, okay, we should probably get started. We're losing time on our 30. Okay, so should we do the first question?
I guess.
Off the wall.
Yeah, first off the wall question.
Be our first question off the wall, which Dave alluded to already. But did Adam and Eve have belly buttons? So the idea is, like usually that's the umbilical cord.
Sure, but Adam and Eve being formed from the dust, no need for an umbilical cord.
Right.
No need for a belly button. So my initial thought is no.
Okay. So Dave says no, just because it would have been unnecessary.
Right. It would have been unnecessary. There would have been no need for it, and Bob, I'll let you know. I understand your concern that maybe Adam and Eve would have been made fun of for not having belly buttons, so God might give them one out of, mercy, but the few number of people, it was all their kids, so they could just, beat them into submission. It would be fine. Yeah, ground them. Like, I'll teach you to mock me for not having a belly button. Ground it.
Take their iPod away.
Take their iPod, yeah. I'm pretty sure that was one of the, that was one of the commandments. Like, if you make fun of your parents for not having a belly button, you will lose your iPad for a
It was
month.
either that, I think stoning to death was one of the, like maybe actual
sometimes, sure, yeah.
punishment, I think, for mocking your parents. But iPod, some think that's just as bad.
Just as bad. Yeah.
I have no strong thoughts on this. I don't really know.
That's probably a healthy position.
Yeah.
Just to not have any strong
I forget who I was talking about. They said when they get to heaven, they're not even going to really say hi to Adam. They're just going to be like, look at him, lift up his shirt. That seems awkward. But anyway, so yeah, I don't know.
Will we be wearing shirts in heaven?
That's a whole other. We can't do that. Okay. We can't do that. Okay, so two of the things we know we're going to do, three of the things we know we're going to do. We'll get to a serious question. Yeah. It is a serious one. Like,
it's a pretty legit.
Yeah, it's hard. So we'll get to that. Dave is a self-proclaimed nerd, and so and all that entails, I think, in all kinds of ways you might want to think of that. Yeah.
So there'll be some. I'll answer some nerd questions, and that's not just today's questions are science related, and they're kind of just some weird science questions. I think I picked out two if we have time that I'll do that are just kind of fun. But I'll answer comic book questions, comic book movie questions, Star Wars, even Star Trek.
Really?
Okay. Yeah, even Star Trek.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're clearly the inferior of the two.
Yeah, but you're not one of those that completely hates Star Trek.
Correct.
Right? Yeah.
Correct. I prefer Star Wars to Star Trek, but I can appreciate nerditum of whatever form. So whether you be a Trekkie or a Star Wars fanboy, as I am.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll have a segment. We're gonna call them segments. I don't think we have the right to do that yet, but we'll call it a segment to where we ask Dave a nerdy question or two. As you probably mostly all know, I am a dad. I enjoy a good dad joke, and so I think at the very end I have two good what I would consider good and dad jokes. I don't know that goes together, but
quality dad jokes.
I have two quality dad jokes. One of them is a biblical dad joke that I heard from Brad Hall, actually.
Oh, okay.
A couple days ago.
Fantastic.
So that'll be another section. So we'll have Ask Dave a nerdy question, and then Kevin will give dad jokes. Mm-hmm. So
and again, so I guess I just want to point out kind of the ground rules that I came up with for this whole thing. Number one, any question. Okay, so if you have a question, put it in the comments, Or I did set up, and I'll have a link to it in the description of the video, as well as I might put a little bubble up on the bottom of the screen here. One of them fancy little hyperlinks that you can click on the video, and it'll take you to the question submission if you want to be anonymous about it. But any question, that doesn't mean we're going to answer the question as detailed as you might want it. For example, if you ask an annoyingly personal question, you might get the answer, none ya business.
None ya.
None ya. And the second one is, don't get offended, just challenge us. Okay, if we say something that offends you, if you say something you disagree with, that's fine. Yeah. I don't think either one of us are quite to the point where we're so set in our ways that I'm going to get mad at you if you say, well, actually, I think this.
No.
But, bring facts, bring Bible verses, bring something other than, I feel like.
Yeah.
And I'm not to discount your feelings. I mean, God gave us emotions, but at the same time, give us something we can actually work with. I feel like is, okay, great, you can feel that way. That doesn't make it factual in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and it's just a good principle just in life you just go back to the Bible. You just go back to the Word of God if you're trying to make any kind of big decision. If you're doing something like this, trying to answer important or non-important questions, but especially important questions, you just go back to the Word of God. And so I was actually thinking along the same lines of Dave. Some of this, I feel like it's not like we either one necessarily, we haven't really talked at all much about this question leading into it. And some of it's going to be just kind of a back and forth. And even I feel like us thinking through it as we're talking. And so it very well may be that we say something and we look back, or somebody gives a comment, and we come back the next week and say, "Hey, what I said here was not right," like because I was thinking off the cuff or whatever. And so we're glad to do that, and we'll do
Absolutely.
that. But I agree with that. So okay, should we get to the?
Yes, and so I guess the serious question, it had different parts, so we might have to divide it up and answer some different parts a different week, because we don't want to completely burn up our time. We want to end with a little bit of that whimsy that's in one of our
one of the
title options.
Maybe we just combine both titles somehow.
Maybe we can.
Off the wall
Wednesday words of wisdom and whimsy.
Wisdom.
Boy, that's a mouthful. That's a mouthful.
Okay, so I'm gonna throw this question today first. So this was our serious question. You'll see us looking down. I'm looking at my phone. I don't know if you can see that or not.
I'll be looking at a stack of material that I have here because I'm a nerd.
He's much more prepared for this than I am. So hence me asking the question, him starting to answer. Okay, so the big question, which I think is a really, really good question. Why does God's message seem so different between the Old and the New Testament?
Yeah.
Why does the message seem so different when you read through the Old Testament and when you read through the New Testament?
Yeah. And so that is a fantastic question, and it's something that, I mean, even some pastors have, they point out that the Old Testament God is the one of, justice and fury and vengeance, and then the New Testament God is the one who is willing to sacrifice his own son for us out of love. And if you just frame it like that, then it's no reason people get confused. One of the ways that okay, so let's start with, you're not alone in getting confused by that. All right. I have here a book. I don't recommend reading it, okay, but I did. It's called The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins. He's a very outspoken atheist, but here's what he has to say about the God of the Old Testament, okay? And keep in mind, this is the God that we're telling you should worship, okay? But he says the God of the Old Testament is arguably the most unpleasant character in all fiction. Jealous and proud of it, a petty, unjust, unforgiving control freak, a vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pesticidal, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully. So that's a mouthful. That's...
I don't even know what some of those words mean.
Yeah.
But I think
none of it's good.
No. But and I also think there's enough in there that there are a lot of people who agree with that, at least to some extent.
Yes.
Right? That the God of the Old Testament is this fierce, constantly angry, no grace type of.
And that's something, like I said, there are some pastors, famous pastor, he did a whole sermon. The whole sermon about like hellfire, the god of hellfire or something like that. I forget what it was. It was something I learned about in high school literature. But anyway, there certainly seems to be a difference there. And I chose to focus on primarily because an author of a book I've read focused on this section. So, take that for what it is.
Makes it easy.
Yeah, it makes it really easy. In Deuteronomy chapter 7, and this is right after God basically says, you're going to be my chosen people, he tells the Israelites so this is Moses speaking based on what God told him to say, and when the Lord your God gives them over to you, this being Hittites, Jerushite, something like that, Amorites and Canaanites and Perizzites, a few more. When the Lord gives them over to you and you defeat them, you must utterly destroy them. Okay? And some people reading that, I mean, you look at Jesus. Jesus says turn the other cheek, right? So that's one of those clear instances of how do you mesh those two. And let's first of all recognize the fact that God's smarter than us. God knows more than us. Okay? So, plus, those are God's created people the same we are. Okay? He has the right to, if he wants to, it's kind of his right. Also, though, it's not as bad as it sounds. The very next portion says, make no covenant with them, do not intermarry with them.
Mm-hmm.
How can you intermarry with the people that you have utterly defeated? The way, and
was it utterly destroyed?
Utterly destroyed, and it depends on, there's a couple different versions that you might have that will say it slightly differently. But the example that's given, and the title of the book I'm referencing is Stealing from God, and it's all about the things that atheists kind of...
Frank Turek?
Frank Turek, yep. Pretty good book, and he employs the stop method in order to kind of analyze this passage and give you some insight into it. And so the stop is S is situation. What's the scenario behind the passage? Type. What type of literature is it? Object. Who is the object of the text? Who's it speaking to? And prescription. Is this something that God's telling us how we're supposed to live, or is this just historical documentation? And under type, he basically says, this is hyperbolic, okay? It's not meant to be literal. In John chapter 10, when Jesus says he is the door, you don't look for hinges, right? He doesn't mean he comes with hinges. And if you went over to your grandma's house and said, I'm hungry as a horse, she's not going to give you a bowl of oats and hay, right? There's certain literary license in here.
Well, I think going back to the point you made a second ago, I think we know that because he gives them direction to it's clear later in the chapter that they're still around.
Yes, and it's clear later.
God's saying this, they're still going to be around.
Mm-hmm.
So when he says utterly destroy, he's apparently not meaning kill every last one of them and none are left, because he gives direction to the ones who are still around. This is what you don't do with them. Don't intermarry. Don't. Right.
And that's one of those things that honestly that popped into my head partially because of in our question it references that God tells people to utterly God tells the Israelites to utterly destroy these nations, and also it's something that atheists use. Richard Dawkins uses that example in a whole chapter of his book about how God is so malicious. But then that same Old Testament God is the one who appeared before Moses as a burning bush and said, free my people, get them out of Egypt. That was before here, right? It's that same God who saves the Israelites by parting the Red Seas. It's that same God who granted Isaiah children at a very old age. His last son in particular. And there's other parts in the Bible or the Old Testament where it's clear that God is, he's just as merciful.
Well, in one story you can think of that came to mind as I was looking through some of this is with the people of Nineveh.
Yeah.
And God is telling Jonah, right? He's saying, hey, go and warn these people. Go and warn them that if they don't change, this is what's going to happen if they don't change it. And people who look at the Old Testament, they see just a God of vengeance and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't see him as a God who would say, hey, warn these people. I don't want to destroy them. This is not go and warn them. And we know Jonah, he fights and goes the other way. And finally comes back and does warn them. And what do you know? Like they completely change direction. God holds back from destroying them. Jonah's mad sitting up on the hill watching this, just angry,
Right.
But there are stories like that throughout the Bible of God giving some of the people who
incredible mercy
and decades and hundreds of years of mercy and warning and saying, hey, you need to change, you need to change, you need to change. And so it's not as if he just said, I'm feeling bad today, I'm going to destroy that civilization right.
And the Canaanites are a great example of this in chapter 7 because it describes them as a people who were so vile that the land vomited them out. The setting that's described in stealing from God is, these people were sacrificing their own children to worship their false gods. That just horrible things, and 400 years
Yeah.
after 400 years of that kind of iniquity, this is a direct quote from the book, the Canaanites had become so foul, the Bible said the land vomited out the inhabitants. So maybe God was just exercising some judgment and using the Israelites for that, right?
And this is one of those thoughts that just popped to my head. So take it for what it's worth. You know what I mean? But if we, as a lot of us believe, if a child dies, a lot of us would say that God has mercy on that child. There's like a time of accountability.
Right.
We get really upset if we read a story like that and children die, when it could possibly and potentially be the most merciful thing that could have ever possibly happened for that child. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Because if we believe that, then they go,
right.
he has mercy on them, and they go to heaven. They're in heaven for all
right.
eternity.
They're with God as opposed to with this
terrible civilization that literally melting babies. I mean, that's horrible.
It is a
sacrificing babies in that way.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Again, take that for what it's worth.
Well, and I was kind of thinking that, kind of a slightly humorous but also offensive thing. People joke about, if you ever invent a time machine, go back and kill baby Hitler. We think that the killing of babies is abhorrent, but at the same time we joke about killing baby Hitler because we know of the potential good, the potential lives saved from that.
Okay, so let me read this. This is from Deuteronomy 9:5, so a little bit later from where Dave read. It's God making something clear to the Israelites. He says, not because of your righteousness or your integrity that you are going in to take possession of their land, but on account of the wickedness of these nations. And so God makes it clear. It's we talk about humility a lot, and this is just another one of those times when God's like, hey, it's not because you're so awesome. He's like, I'm taking care of some wickedness now. And then obviously this is a whole other point, I guess, but the entire story is leading us to, the pivotal moment of history of Jesus coming and dying on the cross. So all of these true stories have a purpose that is leading and guiding us to this sacrificial death of Jesus and his resurrection.
And, we point to the story of Jesus' crucifixion as the ultimate expression of God's mercy and grace, but it's also the ultimate expression of his judgment.
Yep.
It's not that God just said, okay, hey, I'm just going to forgive you. He said, no, justice has to be served, and I'm going to pour that justice, I'm going to pour that pain onto my son instead of you. So it is that story of mercy and grace, but it is also a story of some pretty hardcore justice being doled out.
It's a consistent, people say, oh, God of the Old Testament is a God of wrath. Well, that's what we say is poured out onto Jesus.
Right,
that's
that wrath.
That's in the New Testament, it is that wrath. And I had a similar point, there's love, mercy, and grace and wrath in both the Old Testament and in the New Testament. It's just people like to sometimes pick and choose, what they go. Let me read one other verse here that I meant to do a little bit earlier. Where I'm coming from is, like I said, we're going to try to go back to the Bible, and that's going to be our basis. So here's James 1:17. Every good gift and then every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. So the Bible tells us that God didn't change from the Old Testament to the New Testament. He wasn't some different God now.
Right.
It's the same God, and so I'm trusting that from the Word of God, and I'm trusting that some of these things have been twisted and skewed to fit a narrative about how terrible God is in the Old Testament.
And another point you have to keep in mind is that the Old Testament was written with a completely different style. I mean, a totally different language than was the New Testament. Most of the New Testament is letters, that talk about God's mercy and grace. Versus the vast majority of the Old Testament is simply history. Not necessarily, here's what you should do, but here's what happened. right? Here's the way things went down.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of have to keep that in perspective too. Because that's another thing that's thrown out against Christianity is, oh well, Christians believe you should just have one wife and you should not, ever divorce for any reason whatsoever. And then they point to like, oh, King David, man after God's own heart, who had a bunch of wives. And I forget who the guy was who he answered that question.
I think it was Tim Keller.
Tim Keller, yeah, it was Tim Keller. He answered that question. He said, well, nowhere in that account of David's life does it say, hey, you should live like this.
Yeah,
it's
a great idea.
Yeah, it just says that that's how he lived. And he pointed out, they typically weren't always all that happy when they made those decisions that run contrary to how, the Bible says we're supposed to live versus just here's how this person did live.
Yeah. Here's another verse for you from the Old Testament. Ezekiel 33:11. I have no pleasure in the death of the wicked, but that the wicked turn from his way and live. And so that's who God is. We see times when judgment was carried out, and but this is who I believe God is. He has no pleasure. He's not sitting up there just like, ooh,
right.
Fun times.
It's just
ready to destroy some people.
I'm picturing that scene from Bruce Almighty when he smite me, Almighty Smiter.
That's what people think. He's the Almighty Smiter.
He's just waiting there to like boom. Yeah. And if that were true, you would have been smited.
I was gonna say smitten, but
that's you're infatuated with someone who's smitten.
You're smitten with them.
Smoted?
That
can't be right. I don't know. Someone can
put
that in the comments.
I don't know. I don't know. I have no idea what that would be. Okay. I think there's a couple other points to make, but we've got 6 minutes.
Okay.
And so I want to look up something just real quick. Well, let me make one more point about this, and then I guess we can move on to. Do we still have the nerdy question and
still have the nerdy question and the dad joke, and so that those of you who asked this question, we will get to the rest of the question, but obviously we just decided to really tear apart the first part, so we'll cut into the rest.
I'm going to get to one point just real quick.
Okay.
How were people saved in the Old Testament?
Okay.
That was because it fits along with this.
Yeah. How
were people saved in the Old Testament? Guess what? The same way they're saved in the New Testament, right? It's by grace through faith. It's God's grace poured out on people and people having faith looking to a Savior. And so sometimes we get that confused as well. And we think, because Jesus hadn't come yet, it's different. It's not grace through faith.
Right.
It always was.
Yes.
And so I don't know how deep we want to go into that, but just
I guess well, let's plan on diving probably a little bit deeper into that one next time, because I have some points about God's chosen people, Old Testament versus New Testament.
Yep.
But I
that'll fit well there.
Right. Yeah. I would just kind of like to point out that many of you are aware of the law that the Israelites had to follow to earn forgiveness, but God did not have to allow that, right? He did not have to allow them to, here are the steps you can go through to be considered clean. He could just say, oh, you messed up. Too bad. Done. So sad.
Yeah.
We're done.
Yeah. Bad timing. Sorry.
So, yeah.
Okay. Dave?
Yes.
You have two.
Should we, is this...
pretend
we'll
like
just,
you
we'll
take
just,
one down.
We'll pretend. Okay, so it's definitely...
Let me read it to you.
Yeah,
here it is.
It's definitely on that sheet of paper.
Okay. This is something I do not know.
Okay.
Well, I think most of these are going to be things that I don't know. Okay. How do flies walk on the ceiling?
That is an excellent question that for some reason I know the answer to.
Okay.
And some of this I'll just let you know. I knew ahead of time, but I learned some fun pieces of information today. So the short answer is foot glue. Flies and most insects come equipped with foot glue.
Okay. So they're not just up there flapping their little wings.
They're not just up there flapping their little wings and they're not demon possessed and can float that way. No, it's foot glue. So they actually stick to the ceiling. They have their little feet are kind of spatula shaped. They are called pulvilli, okay? And they have tiny hairs that secrete a mixture of sugar and oil. So it's organic. And that's how they stick to things. The most fun part that I learned is that just their own strength, they cannot pull themselves, they cannot lift their foot back up once it's stuck. They come built with claws on either side of that little foot thing.
What?
And whenever they want to lift up their foot, those claws have to pry themselves loose every time they take a step. So when you see a fly walking across your arm, I know it's annoying and you want to swat it immediately, but just take a second to appreciate how much effort is going into each and every step that little fly is taking.
Wow. Okay, follow-up question that you did not know was coming, and I don't know if you have the answer. I heard the old rumor that every time a fly lands, it throws up. So, like, lands on your hand, throws up a little bit. Lands on your food, throws up a little bit. Is that true or false? Do you know?
My understanding is yes, that is true. But you can tell when it is throwing up because it's got this little thing on its mouth and you'll kind of see it putting its little weird little nose thing to you. And every time it does that, it kind of spits out a little bit of its solvent saliva to help break down its food so it can slurp it up.
So I liked flies when you were talking about spatula feet.
Well, this is your own fault. You had the follow-up question. You had the follow-up question.
I'm sorry. Okay, one more. How far is the sun?
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
So, read it off.
How far is the sun?
Oh, wow. Okay, that's a tough question you just read off there.
Off the wall.
Off the wall, yeah.
Off the wall.
So, average, it's 93 million miles away.
Okay.
Average. Okay, just fun piece of trivia for you. If you were to get into a commercial flight, so right now Delta is giving you flights for cheap, so book your flight now, and flying at 550 miles per hour, they will get you to the sun in 19 years.
Wow.
Flying at 550 miles per hour.
Yeah.
Little more fun information for you. Most of you hopefully know this by now, but if not, the way that the Earth gets around the sun is we are falling towards the sun, okay? And we just barely miss it, and then our inertia throws us off, and we go a far way away before the gravity pulls us back in, and we fall towards the sun again, which means at some times we're a little bit farther away than others, okay? The time when we are closest to the sun actually occurred in January.
Really?
The coldest time of year, January 5th in 2020. We were closest to the sun this year, January 5th. We were about 91 million miles. As a matter of fact, we were just off the top of my head, 91,398,199.
So we shaved off almost like 2 million.
Almost 2 million, yeah.
Wow.
And 4th of July, Independence Day, you can shoot off some fireworks and know that you have been given a 1.5 million mile reprieve from the sun because we will be 94.
Sorry, there's my timer. We're going to have to shut this down soon. It's okay.
So quick.
I have to get my dad jokes in.
94, yes, 94.5 million miles away. So we'll be farther away during the heat of the summer than we are in July.
Look at that. The more you know.
The more you know.
The NBC. Okay, 2 dad jokes and then we'll stop. The first one. I have to remember it. How do we know that Paul from the Bible, liked coffee? How do we know that, Kevin?
How do we know that, Kevin?
Well, the Bible tells us he brews. Okay, the second one that I like better, if I can remember it. Okay, what is the difference between people in Dubai and people in Abu Dhabi?
I don't know, Kevin. What's the difference?
The people in Dubai do not like the Flintstones. The people in Abu Dhabi do. It's so good. It's so good. Yeah. Okay, well that's it. That's the first.
We're done.
The first one of either Off the Wall Wednesday, Off the Wall, or I can't remember yours.
Wednesday Words of Wisdom and Whimsy.
Okay, so send in more questions.
Yes.
We didn't get a ton, but we got some good ones, which was good for us.
And we'll still be going through those next couple weeks.
Yes, so send them in. We'll post these on Wednesday nights, and I think that's it.
Sounds good.
Thank you.